Hi, thank you so much for tuning in to P2P Relates, where we talk about all things relationships. I'm Pat Renfro, and today I am going to answer a question that one of my subscribers put out there. How do you fix a broken work relationship? That can be pretty tricky considering that we are at work and it's not a lover or a friend or a family member even, but it's business, and yet we're not getting along. I'm going on two implications today. One is if you say something is broken, that means at one point it was fixed. And so we're going to be addressing issues where you all once got along just fine, and for some reason there's a strain, and how to work through that. That's a different challenge than when we're dealing with relationships where we arrive at work and we're not the same at all. We see eye to eye about very little, and we're really just never had any success working together. There is a video for that. There is a discussion to have about that, but we can't address all of it in one ball of wax. That would be pretty confusing. So many times when we're in relationship, if we're not careful, it can become about me. You make me feel this way when you do that. So before I can really address the problem, I've got to start with who? Myself. Because if I believe I'm right, if I'm thoroughly convinced that it's their problem and that it's their fault, I am not going to make any effort whatsoever to resolve the issue. I am going to instead project onto the other person that if they would change, everything would be okay. So the very first step that you have to take is to assess yourself and say, what is my contribution to this challenge we're having, this place that we have found ourselves? What might my contribution be, and how might I be better than I currently am? That takes the pressure and puts it on you to resolve it. Now, let me give you a caveat. If you don't resolve it, you just ignore it, it will blow up at probably the absolute worst time. I'm going to cover 6 areas, and we just finished the first one. And so let me get the other 5 out there for you, and we're not going to be here long, I promise you. Don't ignore it, but address it quickly. Now, when I say quickly, I don't mean at the jerk of a knee run after trying to resolve the issue, because sometimes we're carried away with ourselves. We're upset, we're offended, we're frustrated, we're appalled. It just depends on what it was that happened. And as a result, that is not the right mindset to take into addressing the issue. However, if you don't address the issue, it will eventually and potentially get out of control. So to nip it in the bud, to stop it from turning from resentment or jealousy or disappointment or anger into bitterness and unforgiveness and resentment, address it quickly. That means give yourself a 48-hour window max and then address it. But in that time, do step 1. Got to do your self-assessment. Number 3, as you do your assessment and as you utilize those 48 hours, number 3 is really stop and think about what worked well when things were whole, when things were working, when things were fixed. Reflect on those things. Think about the positive things that you all have experienced, because we all have something we're going to encounter with a dear friend. There's no way to have a true, healthy relationship and never have differences. So when those differences come, it's really important to gently and lovingly, kindly, carefully, respectfully address those issues. Don't just let them fester, because they will turn into something that neither you nor they would want it to turn into in most cases. Most of those extreme cases happen because you didn't address it. You thought it would just go away. That's convenient. 4, develop some mutual values that you can both operate from. This will help the relationship find its way back to health. For an example, If we say, next time I'm offended, I'm going to start with myself. And if it's still there, I'm going to come to you and at least tell you how I felt when this particular thing happened. And I would hope that we would be safe to address issues. That could be a mutual agreement. You put it out there, your party agrees, we'll work to that. They give you one. And you all come up with how should you work together better? Sometimes things happen because we have different work ethics. We have different understandings of the work. We have different understandings of the timeline, and we have different understandings of the process that's going to be followed. And these end up being assumptions. I assume that this is how you saw it because that's how I saw it. In my mind, that was logical. We shouldn't do that. We should check in regularly, communicate. That was on my previous video with my interviewee, David Bomar. He said, we really have to work on our communication and find a way to get everybody on the same page so that we could have some agreed upon ways that we address things. So when you're working with individual people, you've got a team that you're working on, maybe you all together, the two of you have a project, then sometimes we assume that because we had one person that gave us the direction that they wanted us to go in and one person that we report to, we all got it and let's just do it. But no, all about teaming is working through to get one standard agreement and understanding so that as we progress, we're on the ship and we're not trying to take different directions. We're all going in the same consistent place. 5 is probably the most unfortunate place to have to arrive to. But we're not always going to be able to resolve all relationship issues. One way to address that issue is to speak up in a very respectful manner about your opposition to their approach or whatever's going on. But if they blow you off, if they react as if I'm grown and you're not the boss of me and I don't have to do that. And sometimes people do that just because they feel like you're trying to control them. And the way they deal with that is they rebel and they do the very opposite that you would want because they're saying, leave me alone. But we're going to run into that as we have differences and different perspectives. So when that happens, then you have to know when to pull back. And if you can let that thing go and just say, hey, that's their way, don't particularly care for it, don't really agree that it's appropriate, but it's not a deal breaker. It's not the end of the road. It's not the end of life. So if I can take those attitudes, I can let it go, let them have it, and move on. If it is an issue that cannot be ignored like that or released, because sometimes it's not about ignoring. Sometimes you just make a very intellectual, intentional decision to let it go. On the scope of things, what we've accomplished, what we're capable of as two colleagues, what we've experienced on a positive level, that thing right there goes out the window. It's not worth it. We have too much at stake here. Once you decide what you're going to do, let it go, or no, this is really significant, very important. I'm going to have to go to upper management at this point and have a conversation because we're not doing so well. And sometimes that's necessary, but it needs to be the exception and not the rule. If your manager, your boss, your leader sees you as a person who's always running to him or her to say, I'm having a problem with so-and-so, even if it's the same person, even if they're known to be troublemakers, you're going to be looked at as how you handled it. They're going to say, is she a problem solver and a troubleshooter, or is she trouble? So let that be your last resort when you can't resolve an issue. And finally, number 6, extend forgiveness and grace. What I mean by that is when we get offended, when we get perplexed or annoyed or frustrated, especially in a work environment, we're thinking if they would just do it like this, we wouldn't even have this problem in the first place. And so that position can be a very self-righteous position. But if you could back up for a minute and think, everybody doesn't do everything well, and definitely a lot of people don't do it like I do it. And how many times have I done something I was very determined to have it my way, to expedite it the way I thought it needed to be done. But I was in error, and I didn't own it, or I hurt people along the way. And maybe somebody said something and maybe they didn't. Maybe it cost me something and maybe I'll never know. But what I'm saying is that we're all human and we're all going to make poor judgments at times and make mistakes. And so if you could have grace for that person and say, okay, that's just how they operate. That's how they flow, and I don't appreciate it, or I don't like it, or it's not my bailiwick, but it's not the end of the world, and I need to let that go. Or I just need to visualize this in a way that says, wouldn't I like that same grace yielded to me for a mistake I made? And what I mean, give you an example real quick. We're at a restaurant. The waitress comes, gets ready to place the plates down. She's got 4 in her hand and one slides out and it falls onto the table and it spills on the dress for the evening that you were getting ready to go out for. Okay, you're upset. Your dress is messed up. You probably paid a lot of money for it. So it's very upsetting. It's not like, oh, well, no big deal. But in your career, in your lifetime, have there ever been times where, boy, you really blew it and you dropped it and you hurt people or you inconvenienced people greatly because of the decision you made? The whole 4 plates that you really probably couldn't have handled because you were rushing. We just all make mistakes. And so if we're co-workers that give each other a chance to be imperfect, that gives each other a chance to be less than like me, we can get along. Whether it's friendship, dating relationship, you're married, it's your spouse, a business relationship, you gotta have grace for people. That doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries. I talk about this all the time. Look at some of the self-development pieces that I've done. But you want to just remember that we are a lot of times doing the best we can, the best we understand, the best we see. And maybe what we're doing is not right. It's not the best thing, but it's not the end of the world. It doesn't make us evil. It doesn't make us purposefully mean. We're just not probably making the call that's best for those that we're around. And so if you can just have a place in your heart that has room for that, so that you're not tolerating it, but you're understanding that we're all different, that may go a long way toward you being able to be more amenable with other people and the differences. We're going to have differences and conflicts with people, but when the good days come, they're really wonderful days. And that is what you need to reflect on, is everything about a relationship is not bad. And as long as you're not in harm's way, you're not being abused in some kind of way, we got differences. And if we can just remember how good the good times are, it makes so much of a difference to want to preserve that and get back to it. So thank you so much for tuning in to P2P Relates, where we talk about all things relationships. Check out some of my other videos in the different categories. And also hit that subscribe button. And when I upload a video, you will get notified if you click the bell. And always ask for that like. Give me a thumbs up. Welcome your comments. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next Friday. Bye.